Now, due to the nature of Part 6's release schedule, that being bad, there might be some people who are interested in Part 6 and Weather, but aren't fully caught up with the part itself. So I'm putting the spoiler warning here for those people specifically, so if you want to avoid them, you have been warned. June 5th, 1972. Two twin boys connected by blood yet separated by fate were born into the world. One found their physical body deformed, where the other found everything in their lives cursed by hardship. Yet, through the ever-attracting power of gravity, the two brothers would find their lives constantly entangled over the years, their hatred for each other growing with each interaction until they finally reached a boiling point. These two were known as Enrico Pucci and his brother, the weathered working man wickedly weaving wavelengths with warping words while wishing for death's warm embrace. Weather Report, the man named after his stand. Weather Report is a man of many different names throughout the entirety of Stone Ocean, and arguably one of the most important elements in the story of Part 6. Originally starting off as an amnesiac Stan user who works to uncover the mystery of his own past and knows that the prison priest Enrico Pucci is involved in some way. Because of this, he assists Jolene and her crew in escaping Green Dolphin Prison and hunting down said priest. And thanks to his efforts, as well as the power of gravity, Weather eventually recovers his memories, his true identity, and uses these memories to help shape a new world for the future. Though before we get too deep into that, let's first understand the meaning behind his name and design. Starting first with his design, Weather Report for a majority of the series wears a modified prison jumpsuit with several holes cut in the chest and collar, all vaguely heart-shaped. As well, his prison uniform is adorned with metal plating and a large belt with a W belt buckle, which is obviously in reference to one of his names. This can either be Weather or Wes. As well, the chest holes match up very well with his old work jumpsuit that he used to wear when he was younger. It even has the same fur cuffs as that, so in universe, I like to reason that the outfit is designed after the one that he used to wear, if not the same outfit. Though, speaking of fur, one of the most noticeable aspects of his design is Weather's own flat-top buffalo hat with two small horns sticking out the front. This is one of Araki's favorite aspects of his character, considering it to be one of his defining traits, and even recently claimed that it's his favorite designed piece in the series. Now, the hat is likely in reference to the acid jazz and funk band Jamiroquai, and more specifically their album mascot, the Buffalo Man, which in itself is inspired by the lead vocalist JK, as he created it when he was sketching a silhouette of himself. The horned hat is likely a byproduct of his own habit of wearing large decorative hats while he performs. Now, name-wise, Weather has quite a few names to speak of, all of them fitting in line with Part 6's own fashion naming theme. Let's start first with his intended birth name, Domenico Pucci, with the Pucci part obviously being in reference to the Italian politician and fashion designer Emilio Pucci, which is the same place his brother got his name from. But the Domenico is taken from another Italian fashion designer, that being Domenico Mario Dolce, who is one half of the company Dolce & Gabbana, which was also used as a naming reference for the stand user of Yo-Yo Ma, this being D&G. Though Weather never really got to live by these names for more than moments, as he was forcibly adopted one night and raised under a new name, this being Wes Bloomerine, which is actually a bit more complex of a name. First, starting with his family name, Bloomerine, which this time is in reference to the fashion brand instead of its designer, this being Bloomerine, which has gone through a couple naming changes of its own and is now known as Bluefin. Though his given name, Wes, is actually a pretty cool one, and it ties back to his Weather Report identity, as Wes claims that he has a nickname which is Weather. This is likely done because Wes and Weather are pronounced the same in Japanese, and that of course ties directly into the name that he is referred to most by in the series, this being Weather Report, based on the American jazz fusion band Weather Report, which started in 1970 and lasted until 1986, which is actually 2 years shy of when Weather Report would appear in-universe for the first time. Now, Weather Report is considered to be one of the bands that helped popularize the jazz fusion genre of music, as early on the band members decided to abandon a restriction that was found in most other jazz bands, this being the focus on concepts like soloist and accompaniment when it comes to making their music. This shift away from tradition allowed the band to create a unique sound based on the spontaneous improvisation of the members, which they could all partake in at any time. which meant that in all ways the band was never about one single person, but the collective group. And while it's likely not intentional by Araki, Weather's character reflects this aspect of his name's inspiration in his interactions with the main group, as due to Weather's own lack of a personal identity, he focuses his attention on the status of the group, dedicating his time in and out of arcs to helping keep their balance as a team, either by saving them in their times of need, or helping them keep a level head in a dangerous situation. This is because, even if he is an amnesiac weirdo who walks on his tippy toes and reads TV guides for fun, even though he doesn't read TV, Weather is the team anchor, and the thing that helps him maintain his status as that anchor is his stand, which he names himself after, this being Weather Report. Weather Report is a stand of varying ranges, but predominantly it takes the form of a close-range stand, which resembles a humanoid figure comprised of clouds, with the majority of its joints actually being masked by obscuring clouds. Now, personality-wise, the stand seems pretty reserved, but it is strictly loyal to Weather's survival, and will automatically defend him in times of danger in a similar manner to how Jotaro's Star Platinum works. Now, its knuckles are studded in a similar way to other close-range stands, meaning that it's viable for close-range fights, and its head design resembles that of a face guard mixed together with a spiked crown. I believe the look of this stand is done in a way to reference the visuals of a marble statue of Greek gods, seen specifically in the winged ankles, as the stand could be in reference to the Teleria, or winged sandals of Hermes, which allow the god to soar through the clouds like any other bird. Now, ability-wise, Weather Report might be one of the most versatile stands in the series, allowing the user to freely control the weather by manipulating the atmosphere, as Weather Report will distort the area around him to call forth helpful weather phenomenons like rain, lightning, and intense winds, which is already pretty powerful, as just being able to call down targeting lightning on its own is strong. But what puts Weather Report on a level of its own is the range and level of precision involved in this ability, as it's able to affect things 30 plus kilometers away from the user, right down to it being able to create microclimates often around the user's body. Weather Report controls the size and area of effect of the weather, which means that Weather Report can do things like wrapping the user in a micro layer of atmosphere, increasing the air pressure around their general area to both deflect projectiles and set aflame anyone who tries to get close to him. As well, Weather can also create miniaturized weather events, such as creating a palm-sized rain cloud within a building using the moisture in the air. Then he can control a gust of wind to blast the rain around as he pleases. He can also control the level of severity and the lasting effects of weather as well, such as calling down a momentary monsoon and then quickly evaporating it into a thick layer of mist for his allies to hide in. Or he can create a single spot of sunlight that shines through a dark rain cloud that prevents someone from getting wet. The stand also seems to be able to manipulate moisture in a location and create clouds that wrap to the user's will, like when he is able to make a protective suit around him and his allies, as well as generate a massive cloud to cushion the damage from a car crash. Offensively, Weather can also use this to hyperfocus an area's water to flow directly into someone, causing him to bloat due to water consumption, and likely killing them. And with his ability to control the moisture in a given location, that also means Weather can control the surrounding temperature, meaning that Weather can use this manipulation of liquids in the area to evaporate them and then suddenly flash freeze them, resulting in sharp ice stalagmites forming around the user. Weather Report can also completely control the wind around him as well, allowing the user to essentially glide around at will and create extremely condensed air gusts that can pierce through a person's arm like a super condensed vortex cannon. But even outside of manipulating these commonly understood weather phenomenon, like wind, temperature, rain, and lightning, he can also replicate any form of strange weather that he understands the cause of. An example of this being, he can cause it to suddenly rain frogs, replicating the process which is caused by an actual meteorological phenomenon, which a large gust of wind picks up and carries small flightless animals long distances and then drops them when it dissipates. Which honestly means Weather is one top 10 amazing weather phenomenons explained video away from being the strongest dude on the planet. Though, where did this ability originate from? Well, its origin is similar to that of his brothers, Enrico Pucci's stand, this being their late sister's final moments, and the era which branded both of them, as even though they were fraternal twins, due to the actions of a grieving woman on the night of their birth, Weather and Pucci were separated. Weather would go on to be raised as Wes Bloomerine, a simple, hard-working delivery boy, while his brother went on to become a priest. And while working in the town of his true family, Wes would meet a girl named Perla, who turned out to be the youngest sister of Enrico Pucci, and by proxy that means she was Wes's sister as well. Though neither of them were aware of their true identities, they grew close to each other, and be it due to gravity or a twisted hand of fate, they fell in love with one another. Around the same time, Pucci had uncovered the truth of his brother, and he also learned that his sister was in a relationship with him. This information disturbed Pucci, and he worked from the background to break them up, hiring a private investigator to accomplish this. Though the man that Pucci hired was one to pry into the backgrounds of people, he looked deep into Wes's adopted family and found out the mother who had stolen him when he was a baby had relationships with a black man just years prior to his birth. This led him to assume that Wes was a half-black child, and him, being a member of the local KKK, called forth the organization to gang up on and lynch Wes. And they did this while excessively drinking all the while, and because of this, in their drunken stupor, they also began roughing up Perla as well, which was well beyond what Pucci had intended. This one single night of brutal hardship utterly broke Perla. Her first experience with love had been snuffed out in a painful and sudden way. As she described it, her heart would no longer feel anything, not even the rain. Following this statement, Perla would throw herself off the cliffside that she had been dumped at, dying soon after making contact with the water below. And soon enough, the authorities would be called to the scene of the suicide, and Pucci would discover his beloved sister's corpse. And in one desperate plea with God, he called out for anything to preserve his sister in some way. And that's when Dio's gift awakened, granting Pucci his stand Whitesnake and allowing him to create a memory disk of his sister's final moments. All the while, Wes lay atop the cliffside, half alive and clinging on to the memory of Perla's final parting words. Rain. Rain which could even touch a broken heart. Wes's desire to become that rain is what fueled the energy to become his stand. But along with that, mixed in together, was his rage, swelling up like a storm in the form of Weather Report's most deadly ability, this being Heavy Weather. Heavy Weather is an automatic ability created through Weather's own hatred. Using Weather Report's ability to distort the atmosphere, the stand modifies the refraction of the sun's rays and creates subliminal messages, all carried through a series of unassuming rays of light which form beautiful rainbows, a perfect representation of the beauty and danger of the weather. Now, anyone who comes in contact with these rainbows will slowly begin to perceive themselves as becoming snails, either by slowly disintegrating into snail eggs, eventually becoming nothing more than a clump of them, or the person gains snail-like anatomy, such as curling their body into the shape of a shell and their limbs growing snail foots, as well as being able to crawl up walls. And while these effects are intentionally supposed to be psychological, prolonged exposure to heavy weather will affect a person physically, with the assumption being that the organism who perceives or interacts with the subliminal message is reminded of their prehistoric instincts and changes physically. This also means that the people who have become snails become also susceptible to their natural predators, as well as all the snail's weaknesses like dehydration and salt. But beyond this, any interaction with the snails created by heavy weather also results in the person touching them turning into snails as well. And thanks to the nature in which snails breed, these meddlesome mollusks can rapidly replicate themselves in a short period of time. Though the power of heavy weather has one glaring downside: it requires the ability to see to be effective, as those who are blind are immune to the subliminal messaging power of heavy weather, even if the snails touch them. As well, it should be mentioned that Weather is entirely immune to the effects of his stand, as his stand is constantly protecting him. Now, interestingly enough, Pucci mentions an example of how Heavy Weather's power works, and it's based on an actual real thing that occurred in the film and advertisement industry, which all started in the late 50s, when marketing researcher James Vicari inserted advertisements into movie reels lasting only a single frame and suggesting nothing more than the viewer might want some more popcorn or soda. But this caused an immediate, noticeable increase in sales of popcorn and soda throughout theaters, raising sales numbers by 57.8%. Though concern about this advertisement method rose in the general population, and thus the marketing method has been opposed by the FCC and has been, in most public cases, restricted. But filmmakers still use the principle when making movies, utilizing this technique not to sell a product, but to create an experience or feeling for their audience. Also, interestingly enough, Pucci's other example of subliminal imagery, when he speaks of the political poster, while I can't find the exact image Rocky is referencing here, I did find some similar examples in the Gore vs. Bush campaigns back in the early 2000s, which were somewhat relevant during the original release of this chapter, about 2 years off. Though, interestingly enough, this poster talks about a politician named Phillips, who is running for Congress. In part 3, Dio interacted with a United States Senator named Wilson Phillips, and while it's most likely only a coincidence as the two Phillips don't look the same, their names are spelt the same, and Pucci and Dio's characters are very closely intertwined, so I thought this would be an interesting thing to at least point out. Now, this ability gets its name from the 7th Weather Report album, Heavy Weather, which would go on to be the band's most successful album. This album also contained a song called Birdland, which was created to memorialize a jazz club that one of the members liked to frequent, using its name to immortalize its memories forever in one of their most successful songs. This could have been the inspiration behind Heavy Weather's own origin, as it is an unstoppable ability which was created out of the desire to immortalize his lover's last words, and only appears after he regains his memory. Now, Weather's usage of animals, like frogs and snails in his ability, also came from Araki's desire to see Weather use animals in interesting ways, as he wanted to give him a Beastmaster-like quality, which, coincidentally enough, based on his outfit and hat, he kinda looks like the Final Fantasy V job class Beastmaster, though that might not be intentional. As well, the raining of frogs could have been in reference to a similar moment in a movie called Magnolia, as one of the most standout moments in that movie is when it suddenly begins to rain frogs from the sky, and in one moment, it stops a character from committing suicide with a handgun. A scene very similar to this is used in the actual main story of Part 6, where the frogs prevent a brainwashed guard from shooting Jolene. As well, it's likely that the Rain of Frogs is also in reference to the Book of Exodus, and the plagues of Egypt, as the second plague was the area would be swarmed by frogs, sometimes depicted as them raining from the sky, or climbing out of any source of water, though the main purpose was frogs would swarm and destroy the area, which is somewhat represented by how quickly these snail swarms destroy a town which Heavy Weather activates in. And all of this devastating power seems to function outside of Weather's control, with him believing that the only way for it to stop is for someone he trusted to end him. This is likely because, deep down, Weather found some sort of satisfaction in the destruction that his stand created, and his stand was simply just manifesting this hatred onto the world. But more importantly, his stand was aiming for his distant brother, Pucci, who Weather, even in his lobotomized state, felt a powerful connection to and wanted to defeat. And Gravity would unite these two time and time again, and in their final standoff, it is where Weather would put everything on the line in order to put Pucci down, sacrificing his body, mind, and eventually his life. Yet, a sudden twist of fate would cause Weather's finishing blow on Pucci to be interrupted. A car crash caused by Jolene, Versace, and Hermes left enough of an opening for the priest to break free of his brother's clutches, spear him through the chest, and escape via the chaos. Though, unaware to Pucci, Weather had used these final moments to ensure his legacy would be immortalized, as he used Pucci's stand to force out his own stand disc, creating an indestructible effigy of his life and suffering and turning it into a parting gift to his new family, a sign that they should not grieve or feel guilty for his death, but live and finish the job that he started. And it is in the most hopeless moments of the story when Gravity aligns and allows Weather Report to return, allowing him one final clash with his brother at the beginning and end of the world. Though this time, he exists on through the mind of a child, Emporio, who uses his own knowledge and experience to use the stand in a way unlike Weather or Pucci were ever aware of. He began concentrating the oxygen in the room to a 100% purity, which is lethal even in limited doses, and Pucci was unable to protect against this, as unlike other forms of attack, this one was slow, but stealthy, and allowed Emporio to completely incapacitate Pucci, leaving him helpless to Weather Report's coup de grace, which is actually just a continuation of the final blow that he was trying to enact, back before fate intervened. And with this final strike, Weather successfully gets his revenge, not only on his brother, but the world itself, as when Pucci is defeated, Made in Heaven begins to swirl out of control, causing the emergence of a brand new, wonderful world, which is beauty in its own right. This destruction caused through the actions of the older generation, that being Pucci and Weather's own troubled history, which collectively led to the end of the world, well, those scars can always be healed and corrected thanks to the efforts of the next generation, using everything they've learned from the past's failings and mixing it together with what they developed on their own. And because of this, I feel like Weather is one of the best characters in the main cast of Part 6. He and Pucci's connection leads to some of the most interesting reveals in the story, and his stand is one of the best examples of how something so simple as controls the weather can be used in endlessly unique ways. I also feel like the story of this weirdo amnesiac who refuses to remove his hat and was shaped into the person that he is through a deep connection with an estranged family member that he wasn't aware that he had could have been partial inspiration for a JoJo that would come later down the line. Though, this is just my own personal speculation. Though Weather has continued to live on in the memory of fans, as his personality shined through the fact that he was someone without memories, and the way he acted was very enjoyable. And his legacy continues beyond the series in merchandising and advertisement, be it fashion projects, new anime-related material, or even appearing in games. Hell, he was even recently announced as a playable character for Last Survivor, the arcade-only JoJo Battle Royale. I can only imagine that when the Part 6 anime concludes, eventually, his legacy will only strengthen, as his connection to the themes of death and rebirth found all throughout the Stone Ocean's writing is fantastic. Weather was tantamount to a living corpse, someone who is dead and perceived as such by most of the people in his life, be it Pucci, who viewed him as the brother who returned from the dead and the cursed one, or his first love Perla, who considered him dead after the night of terror that they had endured, to even him wishing for his own life of suffering to end but his stand refusing to let him die. He was a person robbed of birthright, memory, and even the simple chance at a normal life, and this rage fueled and formulated an unstoppable force that was his stand. And yet, meeting people like Jolene, Anasui, and Emporio, those who truly loved him, helped revive the man that Weather, a name he picked for himself, was. And in the moment of ultimate despair, on the precipice of life and death, he transformed the pain of his traumatic life into an object that brought forth an aesthetic beauty and inspired future generations to create a new world. I guess it's no wonder that his personal hero was Vincent van Gogh. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MettyNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to regain your own memories, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World with a Concert of Dirty Jokes Don't Exist at buyshimonetta.com. Each disc is personalized for your own hidden memories. That's right, we all have them.